In quiet moments, the choices you make shape the person you will become. You may notice a tightness in your chest before a difficult decision, or the way your hands hesitate when a task feels uncomfortable. This audiobook walks through simple, clear steps you can use in those moments to act with more strength and honesty. You will learn practical habits that work right away, like taking clear responsibility, keeping small promises that build trust with yourself, identifying the values that guide your decisions, and choosing effort even when no one applauds. The audio also shows how to build routines that protect your attention. Review your actions, honestly calm your emotions under pressure, and prefer steady growth over short-term ease. Each chapter ends with one small task you can try immediately, so you feel the change instead of only thinking about it. Over time, those small actions change how your day feels, how your focus holds, and how you respond when things get hard. Expect clearer thinking, calmer breathing, and more confidence in choices you make alone. Follow the steps one at a time and notice the difference in how you treat yourself and how much you trust your own word. If you keep going, this work will make your life steadier, more honest, and more in your control. Chapter 1. Take full responsibility for choices made without supervision. When no one is watching, you are still making choices, and those choices quietly shape the direction of your life. This chapter is about accepting that truth without excuses and without drama. It is about understanding that leadership does not begin when people follow you, praise you, or depend on you. These moments may seem small, but they are powerful because they reveal who you really are. A person who takes full responsibility in private builds a strong inner foundation. A person who avoids responsibility when alone weakens that foundation over time. The difference between these two paths is not talent or luck. It is ownership. Taking responsibility means accepting that your life is largely the result of your own decisions. It does not mean blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong, and it does not mean ignoring factors outside your control. It means recognizing the line between what you can control and what you cannot, and then focusing your energy fully on what is yours to manage. Your thoughts are yours, your actions are yours, your habits are yours. How you respond to events is yours. When you accept this, you stop waiting for permission to improve and stop needing someone to push you forward. Many people behave well only when they feel observed. They follow rules when authority is present and relax standards when it is not. This pattern creates a divided life. One version of the person exists in public and another version exists in private. Over time, this division causes inner conflict and loss of self-trust. You cannot respect yourself fully if you know that your behavior changes based on who is watching. True self-leadership closes this gap. It creates alignment between who you are alone and who you are around others. Responsibility is the bridge that creates this alignment. When you wake up in the morning, there may be no one telling you how to start your day, no one checking whether you use your time well or waste it, no one judging whether you prepare for the future or avoid it. These early moments are important because they set the tone for the day. Responsibility here means choosing intention over impulse. It means deciding in advance how you want to show up, even if the plan is simple. A responsible person does not wait to feel motivated. They decide what needs to be done and take the first step, even when the mood is neutral or low. Responsibility also shows itself in how you speak to yourself. When something goes wrong, it is easy to search for external reasons. Circumstances, other people, timing, and luck become convenient explanations. While these factors exist, relying on them weakens your ability to grow. A responsible mindset asks a different question. It asks what part of this situation is mine to learn from. It asks what choice led here and what choice can improve the next outcome. This shift does not happen once. It is practiced daily until it becomes natural. There is a quiet strength that comes from owning your choices. It removes confusion because you no longer waste energy arguing with reality. Instead of resisting what is, you work with it. If you waste time, you admit it. If you avoid a task, you acknowledge it. If you act with discipline, you recognize that as well. This honesty builds clarity. Clarity builds confidence. Confidence builds momentum. All of this begins with responsibility in moments when no one is watching. One of the most practical ways to develop responsibility is to stop negotiating with yourself in private. Many people make silent deals that lower their standards. They tell themselves they will start later, skip today, or make an exception just this once. These internal negotiations weaken character because they train the mind to break commitments without consequence. Responsibility means setting clear expectations for yourself and honoring them even when the consequences are invisible. If you say you will do something, you do it. If you cannot do it, you admit it honestly and adjust the plan rather than pretending. Another key aspect of responsibility is managing your time without supervision. Time is one of the few resources equally given to everyone, yet it is often treated casually. When no one is watching, it is easy to drift. Minutes turn into hours without purpose. Days pass without progress. Responsibility means treating time as something valuable, even when no one demands results. This does not require rigid schedules or constant productivity. It requires awareness. It means knowing how you spend your time and choosing activities that support your values rather than undermine them. Responsibility also applies to how you consume information. What you read, watch, and listen to shapes your thinking. When no one is watching, it is easy to choose content that distracts rather than develops you. Taking responsibility here means asking whether what you consume helps you think clearly, act better, or understand yourself more deeply. It does not require perfection or denial of enjoyment. It requires balance and intention. You decide rather than react emotional. Responsibility is another essential part of self-leadership. This means owning your emotional responses rather than blaming others for how you feel. When something triggers frustration or disappointment, responsibility does not deny the emotion. It observes it. It asks why it appeared and how to respond wisely. Emotional responsibility prevents small frustrations from turning into harmful actions. It helps you pause, reflect, and choose behavior that aligns with your principles rather than temporary feelings. Stoic wisdom teaches that external events are neutral, and meaning comes from our judgments about them. Responsibility in this sense means examining your judgments carefully. When something upsets you, ask what belief is being challenged. When something excites you, ask what expectation is being created. This level of self-awareness develops strength. It allows you to remain steady when conditions change. No one else needs to see this work for it to matter. In fact, it matters most when it is unseen. Responsibility also involves accepting the cost of your choices. Every choice includes trade-offs. When you choose comfort, you may delay growth. When you choose discipline, you may experience discomfort. Taking responsibility means accepting these costs without complaint. It means understanding that discomfort is not a sign of failure, but often a sign of effort. When no one is watching, it is tempting to avoid discomfort because there is no immediate reward. A responsible person understands that long-term results are built through short-term effort done quietly. Another practical way to strengthen responsibility is to reduce reliance on external validation. When your behavior depends on praise, you become inconsistent. When praise disappears, effort fades. Responsibility shifts the source of validation inward. You begin to measure success by alignment with your standards rather than approval from others. This creates stability. You act with integrity, whether the outcome is noticed or not. Over time, this builds deep self-respect. Responsibility also includes caring for your physical and mental health. When no one is watching, it is easy to neglect sleep, nutrition, and rest. These choices seem small, but their effects accumulate. Taking responsibility here means recognizing that your body and mind are tools for living well. Treating them poorly reduces your ability to act with clarity and discipline. Simple habits such as consistent sleep, regular movement, and moments of quiet reflection support self-leadership more than dramatic changes. Another area where responsibility matters is honesty. When no one is watching, it is easy to cut corners, exaggerate, or hide mistakes. These actions may seem harmless, but they shape character. Responsibility means telling the truth to yourself first. It means acknowledging mistakes without denial and correcting them without delay. This builds trust within yourself. Without self-trust, leadership collapses. Responsibility also means preparing rather than reacting. A person who waits until pressure arrives to act is always behind. Preparation happens quietly. It happens when no one demands it. Reading, practicing, learning, and planning are acts of responsibility. They reduce fear because they increase competence. When challenges arise, you are ready not because of luck, but because of choices made earlier in private. It is important to understand that responsibility is not about control over everything. It is about control over effort. You cannot guarantee outcomes, but you can guarantee intention. You can choose to act with care, discipline, and honesty. When outcomes differ from expectations, responsibility allows you to adjust rather than quit. You analyze what worked and what did not. You change the approach and continue. This process builds resilience. Many people fear responsibility because they associate it with pressure and judgment. In reality, responsibility creates freedom. When you own your choices, you no longer feel trapped by circumstances. You understand that while you cannot control everything, you can always control how you respond. This understanding reduces anxiety. It replaces helplessness with agency. Even in difficult conditions, responsibility gives you a place to stand. Responsibility also affects how you treat others when no one is watching. Small acts of respect, patience, and fairness matter. They reflect your values rather than your image. A responsible person behaves ethically even when shortcuts are available. This consistency builds inner peace. You do not need to remember who you pretended to be because you act the same everywhere. One practical exercise to develop responsibility is to end each day with a brief review. Ask yourself what choices you made well and which ones need improvement. Keep the tone neutral. This is not self-criticism. It is self-observation. Over time, patterns appear. You notice where you avoid responsibility and where you embrace it. Awareness creates opportunity for change. Another exercise is to define a small set of non-negotiable behaviors. These are actions you commit to regardless of mood or circumstances. They might include starting work at a certain time, speaking honestly, or caring for your health. Keeping these commitments builds reliability. Reliability builds leadership. Even when no one knows you know. Responsibility also means accepting uncertainty. You may not know exactly where your efforts will lead. That is normal. Avoiding action until certainty appears leads to stagnation. Responsible action does not require full clarity. It requires a clear direction and willingness to adjust. You move forward with the information available and learn as you go. When you take responsibility in private, your public life improves naturally. People sense consistency. They trust those who act with quiet discipline. Leadership emerges not through self-promotion, but through reliability. Others may never know the specific choices you made alone, but they will feel the results. There will be days when you fail to meet your own standards. Responsibility does not mean perfection. It means response. When you fail, you acknowledge it, learn from it, and return to effort without delay. Avoiding responsibility after failure compounds the problem. Accepting responsibility shortens recovery time. It is also important to avoid comparing your private progress with others' public results. Comparison distracts from responsibility. Your focus should remain on your actions and improvements. Progress is personal. Responsibility keeps attention where it belongs. As you practice responsibility, you may notice increased calm. This comes from alignment. When your actions match your values, inner conflict reduces. Decisions become simpler because standards are clear. You no longer debate basic choices, you act taking full responsibility. When no one is watching is not dramatic. It is quiet and steady. It shows up in small decisions repeated daily. It does not seek recognition. It builds character before reputation. Over time, these small decisions create a strong inner leader. In the end, self-leadership is about trust. Can you trust yourself to do what is right, even when it is inconvenient? Can you trust yourself to act with discipline, even when no one demands it? Can you trust yourself to learn from mistakes rather than hide them? Responsibility answers these questions through action. Commit to ownership today, not in a grand way, but in a simple way. Choose one area where you will act with full responsibility regardless of observation. Keep that commitment, then choose another. Over time, this practice becomes part of who you are. You become someone who leads from within, someone whose strength is built in private and expressed naturally in public. This is how self-leadership begins. Chapter 2. Build daily discipline through small promises kept consistently. Discipline is not built through sudden intensity or dramatic change. It is built quietly through small promises that are kept, especially when they feel easy to ignore. This chapter is about understanding that discipline is not force but reliability. It is not about pushing yourself harshly, but about becoming someone who follows through. When you keep small promises to yourself each day, you send a clear signal to your mind that your word matters. Over time, this signal becomes identity. You stop trying to be disciplined and start acting like someone who is. Many people believe discipline requires strong motivation. That belief creates inconsistency. Motivation rises and falls, but discipline must remain steady. The strongest form of discipline is not emotional drive, but simple agreement with yourself. A promise does not need to be large to be powerful. In fact, large promises often fail because they depend on energy and ideal conditions. Small promises succeed because they fit into real life. They can be kept on good days and difficult days alike. A small promise might be waking up at the same time each day, even when you feel tired. It might be reading a few pages, walking for 10 minutes, writing one paragraph, or organizing a small space. These actions appear ordinary, but their effect is cumulative. Each time you keep a promise, you strengthen trust with yourself. Self-trust is the foundation of discipline. Without it, effort feels forced. With it, effort feels natural. Breaking promises to yourself damages more than progress. It weakens confidence. When this happens repeatedly, you begin to doubt your ability to change. You hesitate to set goals because past promises were not kept. Discipline then feels heavy because it is built on guilt rather than reliability. The solution is not stronger willpower, but smaller commitments. When promises are realistic, they are easier to honor. When they are honored, confidence returns. Keeping promises consistently also trains patience. Results do not appear immediately. Discipline asks you to work without instant reward. This is difficult in a world that offers quick stimulation. Small promises counter this by shifting focus from outcome to process. You stop asking whether something is producing visible results and start asking whether you showed up as planned. This change in focus reduces frustration and increases stability. Consistency matters more than intensity because consistency builds rhythm. Rhythm reduces resistance. When an action becomes part of your day, it requires less mental effort. You no longer debate whether to do it. You simply do it. Discipline then becomes quiet and efficient. This is the kind of discipline that lasts because it does not rely on constant decision-making. A useful approach is to define promises that require effort, but not strain. Strain leads to avoidance. Effort leads to growth. The difference is subtle but important. An effortful promise challenges you slightly without overwhelming you. It respects your current capacity while stretching it gently. Over time, your capacity expands naturally. Discipline grows without burnout. Another important aspect of daily discipline is timing. Promises tied to specific moments are easier to keep. Vague intentions invite delay. Clear timing creates structure. This does not mean rigid schedules. It means clarity. Knowing when something will be done reduces internal negotiation. Discipline strengthens when negotiation ends. It is also important to protect your promises from unnecessary complexity. Complexity creates excuses. Simplicity creates follow-through. If a promise requires special conditions, equipment, or long preparation, it becomes fragile. When conditions are not perfect, the promise is broken. Simple promises survive imperfect days. They are adaptable. This adaptability is key to consistency. Daily discipline also involves restraint. Sometimes the promise is to stop rather than start. It might be limiting screen time, avoiding certain habits, or ending the day at a reasonable hour. These promises require awareness rather than action. They build discipline by strengthening control over impulses. Each time you choose restraint, you reinforce the ability to pause before reacting. Discipline is also shaped by how you respond after breaking a promise. Everyone fails at times. The disciplined response is not self-criticism, but correction. You notice the break, understand why it happened, and adjust the promise if necessary. You return to action quickly. Delayed recovery causes more damage than the initial break. Discipline is preserved through response, not perfection. The Stoic view of discipline emphasizes control over effort rather than outcome. You are responsible for showing up, not for guaranteeing results. This mindset removes pressure. You focus on what is within your control. Small promises fit this philosophy well because they center on action rather than success. You promise effort, not achievement. Daily discipline also benefits from reflection. At the end of the day, quietly note which promises were kept. This is not for pride or shame, it is for awareness. Awareness strengthens discipline by making behavior visible. What is visible can be improved. What is ignored remains unchanged. Another factor in discipline is environment. Your surroundings can support or undermine promises. A disciplined person designs their environment intentionally. This might mean keeping tools visible, removing distractions, or creating quiet space. Environment reduces reliance on willpower. Discipline becomes easier when surroundings support your intentions. Language also matters. How you speak to yourself about promises affects consistency. Clear and firm language reinforces commitment. Avoid conditional phrasing. A promise is not a hope, it is an agreement. When you treat it as such, your mind responds differently. Discipline strengthens through clarity. Over time, small promises accumulate into identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through. This identity influences future choices. When faced with temptation to quit or delay, you remember who you are becoming. Discipline then becomes self-respect in action. You act in ways that align with your self-image. Discipline also creates momentum. One kept promise makes the next easier. Momentum reduces friction. This is why starting small is effective. The goal is not to impress, but to progress. Progress builds belief. Belief fuels further effort. It is important to avoid comparing your discipline to others. Discipline is personal. What matters is consistency relative to your own commitments. Comparison distracts from responsibility. Focus on your promises and your progress. Discipline grows best in focused attention. Daily discipline through small promises also teaches humility. You accept that growth is gradual. You stop seeking shortcuts. You respect the process. This humility protects you from frustration and impatience. It keeps effort steady. As discipline develops, you may notice increased calm. This calm comes from reliability. You no longer feel scattered or uncertain. You know what you will do each day. Decisions simplify. Energy is conserved. Discipline becomes supportive rather than restrictive. Small promises also prepare you for larger challenges. When discipline is practiced daily, it becomes available during stress. You do not need to invent discipline under pressure. You already have it. This reliability is valuable in difficult moments. Ultimately, daily discipline is an act of self-respect. You treat your time and effort as meaningful. You honor your word even when no one else is involved. This builds inner strength. Strength built this way is stable because it does not depend on external approval. Commit to one small promise today. Choose something that matters and can be kept. Keep it tomorrow. Then the next day, do not rush to add more. Allow consistency to do its work. Discipline will grow quietly. Over time, it will shape how you live, how you decide, and how you trust yourself. This is how daily discipline becomes a natural part of who you are. Chapter 3. Clarify personal values to guide decisions during solitude. When you are alone and no one is watching, your decisions are guided by something deeper than rules or expectations. In solitude, there is no audience to impress and no immediate consequence to fear. What remains is your inner compass. If that compass is unclear, you drift. If it is clear, you move with purpose, even in silence. Clarifying personal values is not an abstract exercise. It is a practical necessity for self-leadership. Values determine how you act when options are available and pressure is absent. Many people live with borrowed values. They absorb opinions from family, culture, work, and media. Without examining them, these values operate quietly until solitude exposes their weakness. When alone, uncertainty appears. Decisions feel heavy because there is no clear standard. Clarifying values removes this friction. It gives you a steady reference point. You no longer ask what feels easiest or what others might approve of. You ask what aligns with what you believe matters. Values are not goals. Goals change with circumstances. Values remain stable. A goal might be to earn more or achieve something specific. A value might be honesty, growth, or responsibility. When goals fail or shift, values continue to guide behavior. This distinction is important in solitude because goals often rely on external structure. Values do not. They guide behavior without supervision. Clarifying values begins with attention. You notice moments of discomfort or satisfaction. These moments reveal what you care about. When you feel uneasy after an action, it often means a value was ignored. When you feel calm, it often means a value was honored. Paying attention to these signals provides insight. You begin to see patterns. Certain choices leave you unsettled. Others bring quiet satisfaction. These patterns are clues. Another way to clarify values is to observe what you respect in others. Respect is rarely random. It reflects your standards. When you admire someone's consistency, patience, or courage, you are revealing something about your own values. Use this observation to define what matters to you. This does not mean imitation. It means recognition. Solitude offers a rare opportunity to examine values without distraction. In quiet moments, you can ask simple questions. What kind of person do I want to be when no one is watching? What behaviors feel unacceptable to me regardless of convenience? What actions do I want to feel proud of, even if they remain unseen? These questions require honesty. The answers do not need to be impressive. They need to be true. Once values are identified, they must be translated into behavior. Values that remain abstract provide little guidance. Clarity comes from defining how a value appears in daily life. If responsibility is a value, it might show as keeping commitments and managing time. If honesty is a value, it might show as speaking truthfully and admitting mistakes. This translation is essential. Without it, values remain ideas rather than guides. Solitude often presents subtle tests. No one sees small shortcuts. No one notices minor dishonesty. Values determine how you respond. When values are unclear, temptation grows stronger. When values are clear, temptation weakens because the cost is understood. Acting against your values creates inner conflict. Acting in alignment creates inner stability. Clarified values also simplify decisions. Instead of weighing every option emotionally, you measure options against values. This reduces mental fatigue. You stop revisiting the same decisions repeatedly. The answer becomes clearer. This clarity saves energy and increases consistency. Values also provide strength during uncertainty. When outcomes are unknown, values provide direction. You may not know what will happen, but you know how you will act. This steadiness is valuable in solitude, where doubt often grows. Values ground you. They remind you of what remains constant. It is important to revisit values periodically. Life changes. Responsibilities change. Clarification is an ongoing process. This does not mean values should shift easily. It means understanding should deepen. You refine how values apply to new situations. This keeps guidance relevant. Values also protect against impulse. Impulse seeks immediate relief or pleasure. Values consider long-term impact. In solitude, impulse is strong because accountability is low. Values provide internal accountability. They help you pause. They remind you of who you choose to be. Clarity of values also affects self-respect. When actions align with values, self-respect grows naturally. You do not need praise. You know you acted according to your standards. This creates quiet confidence. Over time, this confidence stabilizes behavior. You trust yourself because you understand your principles. Values also shape boundaries. When values are unclear, boundaries blur. You tolerate behavior that conflicts with your standards. Clarified values make boundaries natural. You know what you accept and what you refuse. This applies even when alone. You set boundaries with yourself. You limit behaviors that undermine your values. Stoic philosophy emphasizes living according to reason and principle rather than impulse. Values serve this purpose. They represent reasoned conclusions about what matters. Acting according to values is an act of discipline. It requires reflection and restraint. Over time, it becomes habit. Clarifying values also reduces regret. Many regrets come from acting without clear principles. In solitude, decisions may seem harmless until consequences appear later. Values reduce this risk. They encourage choices that you can stand behind over time. Another benefit of clarified values is resilience. When facing difficulty, values remind you why effort matters. They provide meaning beyond comfort. This meaning sustains effort during challenge. Without values, difficulty feels pointless. With values, difficulty feels purposeful. Values should be few and focused. Too many values create confusion. Identify those that truly guide you. Simplicity increases clarity. A small set of well-defined values is more useful than a long list. Applying values requires awareness. Before acting, ask whether the action supports or undermines a value. This pause is brief but powerful. It shifts behavior from reaction to choice. Over time, this pause becomes automatic. Values also influence how you spend time alone. Solitude can be used for growth or escape. Values guide this choice. If learning matters, you read or reflect. If health matters, you rest or move. Values turn solitude into opportunity. It is important to accept that acting on values may feel uncomfortable. Comfort is not the measure of alignment. Alignment is the measure. Growth often requires discomfort. Values help you accept this without resistance. Clarifying values is an act of leadership. You decide what governs your behavior. You do not leave it to mood or circumstance. This decision creates independence. You become less reactive and more intentional. Over time, values become part of identity. You no longer need to remind yourself constantly. Behavior aligns naturally. This is the result of consistent application. Begin by writing down what matters to you without concern for appearance. Then define how each value appears in daily behavior. Test them in solitude. Notice how alignment feels. Adjust as understanding grows. When values are clear, solitude becomes simpler. Decisions feel lighter. Actions feel aligned. You move through quiet moments with confidence. This is not because choices are easy, but because standards are clear. Clarifying personal values is not a one-time task. It is a practice. Each decision refines understanding. Each aligned action. Over time, values become the quiet guide that directs your life even when no one is watching. Chapter 4. Train your mind to act rightly without applause. Most people learn to behave well when they are praised and slowly relax when recognition disappears. This creates a hidden dependency that weakens character. Acting rightly without applause requires training the mind to value integrity over attention. It is not a natural habit in a world that rewards visibility. It is a learned discipline built through intention and repetition. This chapter is about developing that discipline so your behavior remains steady regardless of recognition. The mind seeks reward. Praise, approval, and acknowledgement feel satisfying. They activate a sense of worth that can easily become addictive. When action becomes tied to reward, effort becomes conditional. You do the right thing when someone is watching and hesitate when no one is. This is not a moral failure, but a mental pattern. Patterns can be changed with awareness and practice. Training the mind begins with understanding that applause is external and temporary. It fades quickly and often depends on factors beyond your control. When your actions rely on something unstable, your discipline becomes unstable as well. Acting rightly without applause means shifting the source of reward inward. The reward becomes alignment with your principles rather than reaction from others. One practical step is to redefine success. Instead of measuring success by recognition, measure it by effort and intention. Ask whether you acted according to your standards rather than whether the action was noticed. This change takes time because the mind is used to external signals. At first it may feel empty or unrewarding. This discomfort is part of the training. It signals that the habit is changing. Another aspect of this training is learning to tolerate invisibility. Many meaningful actions are quiet. Preparation, learning, and self-correction rarely receive praise, yet they create the foundation for visible results later. When you train yourself to value these quiet actions, you become less dependent on immediate feedback. You develop patience and depth. It is also important to observe how often the desire for praise influences decisions. Notice moments when you feel less motivated because no one will know. This awareness exposes the pattern without judgment. The goal is not to suppress the desire for recognition, but to reduce its control. Awareness weakens automatic behavior. Stoic philosophy teaches that virtue is its own reward. Acting rightly is valuable regardless of outcome or recognition. This perspective frees you from chasing approval. It anchors behavior in principle rather than response. Training the mind in this way requires repetition. Each time you choose principle over praise, you strengthen the habit. Another practical approach is to practice anonymous effort. Do something beneficial without attaching your name to it. This could be helping quietly improving a process or supporting someone without seeking acknowledgement. These actions retrain the mind to find satisfaction in contribution rather than credit. Language also influences training. When you speak to yourself after an action, focus on effort and alignment. Avoid internal commentary about whether it will be noticed. This reinforces the new reward system. Over time, the mind begins to associate satisfaction with integrity. It is also helpful to limit exposure to constant validation. Excessive reliance on feedback can weaken internal motivation. This does not mean avoiding feedback entirely. It means balancing it with self-evaluation. Learn to assess your actions honestly without external input. This skill grows with practice. Acting rightly without applause also requires emotional regulation. When praise is absent, frustration can appear. This frustration is a signal that expectation existed. Instead of reacting, observe the feeling. Let it pass without acting on it. This strengthens emotional control and independence. Training the mind also involves accepting that recognition may never come. Some efforts remain unseen. This reality can feel discouraging unless purpose is clear. Purpose grounded in values sustains effort. When you know why you act, you do not need constant affirmation. Another important element is consistency. Acting rightly once without applause is easy. Doing it repeatedly builds character. Consistency transforms effort into identity. You become someone who acts with integrity by default. This identity reduces internal conflict. You no longer debate whether to act rightly. You simply do. It is also useful to examine situations where applause distorts behavior. Sometimes people overextend or perform unnecessarily to gain attention. Acting rightly means doing what is appropriate, not what is impressive. This restraint reflects maturity. It prioritizes effectiveness over image. Training the mind also includes managing disappointment when efforts go unnoticed. Disappointment often comes from expectation. Adjusting expectation reduces disappointment. Expect effort, not applause. This mental adjustment preserves motivation. Another practice is journaling privately about actions aligned with values. This is not for praise but for acknowledgement. You recognize your effort without seeking validation. This builds internal reinforcement. Over time, the need for external reinforcement decreases. Acting rightly without applause also enhances trustworthiness. Others may not see every action, but they sense consistency. Reliability becomes visible through behavior over time. This kind of trust is deeper than popularity. It is built quietly and steadily. It is important to remember that applause is not wrong. Appreciation can motivate and encourage. The goal is not to reject it, but to stop depending on it. You accept praise when it comes, but you do not require it to act. Training the mind also means resisting comparison. Comparison often amplifies the desire for recognition. Focus on your path and your standards. This focus reduces distraction and envy. Over time, acting rightly without applause creates inner calm. You are less reactive to opinions and less anxious about perception. Decisions become simpler. You act according to principle rather than mood. This training also prepares you for leadership. Leaders often act without immediate recognition. They make decisions that may not be popular. Acting rightly without applause builds the strength required for such responsibility. Begin with small situations. Choose to act well when no one notices. Observe the discomfort. Allow it repeat. Gradually increase the scope. The mind adapts through exposure. Remember that discipline grows through repetition, not intensity. Each quiet act strengthens the habit. Each choice builds the muscle. Acting rightly without applause is not about denying human desire. It is about mastering it. You acknowledge the desire and choose not to be controlled by it. Over time, this practice becomes natural. You no longer seek permission or praise. You act because it is right. This creates dignity and stability. When the mind is trained this way, solitude becomes easier. You are not dependent on external signals. You move with confidence, guided by principle. This is a form of freedom. Freedom from constant evaluation. Freedom from performance. Freedom to act with integrity quietly. Commit to this practice. Notice where applause influences behavior. Choose alignment instead. Let the reward be self-respect. This reward does not fade. It grows with each choice made rightly, even when no one is watching. Chapter 5. Create routines that strengthen focus, integrity, and self-respect. Routines shape how you live long before motivation or emotion enters the picture. They quietly decide how your days unfold and how your attention is used. When routines are weak, focus scatters and self-respect erodes without notice. When routines are solid, focus strengthens and self-respect grows naturally. This chapter is about building routines that support who you want to be when no one is guiding you or correcting you. A routine is not about control. It is about direction. Focus is fragile without structure. The mind naturally seeks stimulation and ease. Without a routine, attention jumps from one thing to another, reacting instead of choosing. This constant switching creates mental fatigue. A well-designed routine protects focus by reducing unnecessary decisions. You do not wake up and negotiate every action. You already know what comes next. This clarity preserves energy for meaningful work. Integrity grows when actions match intentions consistently. Routines make this alignment possible. When you decide in advance how you will act, you reduce the chance of compromise. Integrity then becomes a pattern rather than an effort. This pattern builds self-respect because you see yourself following through regularly. You trust your own structure. Many people resist routines because they fear restriction. In reality, routines create freedom. They remove chaos and replace it with rhythm. When basic actions are handled automatically, you have more space to think clearly and act intentionally. Freedom comes from knowing what needs to be done and doing it without resistance. Creating effective routines starts with honesty about your current behavior. Notice where focus is lost. Notice when energy drops. Notice which moments invite distraction. These observations guide routine design. A routine should solve real problems rather than reflect ideal behavior. practical routines fit your life as it is not as you wish it were. Start with anchors. Anchors are actions that begin or end parts of the day. Morning and evening anchors are especially powerful. A consistent start sets tone. A consistent end creates closure. These anchors do not need to be complex. Simplicity increases reliability. A short, focused action done daily has more impact than an elaborate plan done occasionally. Focus improves when routines limit exposure to distraction. This does not require strict avoidance. It requires boundaries. Decide when and how you engage with information. Unplanned consumption weakens attention. Planned engagement preserves it. Routines help enforce these boundaries without constant effort. Integrity within routines also means knowing when to stop. Overextension leads to burnout. A routine should include rest and recovery. Rest is not a reward for exhaustion. It is part of sustainable focus. Including rest in routines strengthens discipline rather than weakening itself. Respect grows when routines reflect your values. If growth matters, routines include learning. If health matters, routines include movement or rest. When routines align with values, daily actions feel meaningful. This meaning reinforces commitment. You do not need external pressure when internal alignment exists. Routines also reduce internal conflict. Without routines, decisions repeat. Repeated decisions create tension. Routines eliminate unnecessary debate. You act according to plan rather than mood. This reduces stress and increases calm. It is important to build routines gradually. Sudden changes overwhelm the system. Introduce one element at a time. Allow it to stabilize before adding another. Stability matters more than speed. A routine that lasts is more valuable than one that impresses briefly. Focus within routines depends on presence. Simply following steps without attention reduces benefit. Engage fully with each action. This trains concentration. Over time, focused attention becomes easier. Routine provides the structure. Attention provides the quality. Integrity within routines also means honoring start times. Delaying routines weakens trust. Even slight delays accumulate. Respecting time commitments strengthens reliability. This reliability reflects self-respect. You show yourself that your time matters. Another element is adaptability. Life changes. Routines should adjust without collapsing. Adaptation is not abandonment. When circumstances shift, adjust the routine while preserving its core purpose. This flexibility keeps routines relevant. Routines also teach patience. Progress may feel slow. Routine rewards consistency, not urgency. This patience protects against frustration. You trust the process rather than chasing immediate results. Self-respect deepens when routines are kept privately. No one sees the effort, yet it continues. This quiet consistency strengthens identity. You become someone who honors commitments without audience. Focus improves further when routines minimize multitasking. Doing one thing fully within routine strengthens attention. Multitasking weakens it. Choose sequence over simultaneity. This improves quality and reduces error. Environment supports routine effectiveness. Arrange space to match routine. Reduce friction for desired actions. Increase friction for distractions. Environment acts as silent reinforcement. It supports focus without willpower. Integrity also involves ending routines properly. Finishing what you start builds confidence. Leaving tasks half done erodes it. Design routines with clear completion points. Completion reinforces discipline. Routines can also act as safeguards during stress. When emotions rise, routines provide stability. You rely on structure when clarity fades. This stability prevents reactive behavior. Routine becomes a grounding force. Self-respect grows when routines reflect effort, not perfection. Missing a day does not define failure. Response defines discipline. Return to routine promptly. Avoid dramatic reactions. Calm correction preserves momentum. Over time, routines shape character. What you repeat becomes normal. Normal becomes identity. Identity influences future choices. This process is gradual but powerful. Focus, integrity, and self-respect are not separate outcomes. They reinforce each other. Focus allows you to act intentionally. Integrity ensures those actions align with values. Self-respect emerges naturally from this alignment. Design routines that serve you rather than impress others. Private consistency matters more than visible performance. Choose routines you can keep even on difficult days. Observe how routines affect mood and clarity. Adjust based on experience. Routine design is iterative. Improvement comes from reflection and refinement. As routines settle into place, life feels steadier. You know how your day will unfold. This predictability reduces anxiety. Energy is used purposefully. Ultimately, routines are agreements with yourself. Keeping them strengthens trust. Trust strengthens leadership. Leadership begins internally. Commit to routines that protect focus, honor integrity, and build self-respect. Keep them simple. Keep them consistent. Allow them to shape you quietly. Over time, you will notice the change not as a sudden shift, but as a steady improvement in how you think, act, and live when no one is watching. Chapter 6. Practice honest self-review to correct behavior early. Honest self-review is one of the most powerful habits a person can develop because it prevents small mistakes from becoming permanent patterns. When no one is correcting you and no external feedback is available, your growth depends on your ability to look at yourself clearly. This is not about harsh judgment or self-criticism. It is about accuracy. Accuracy allows correction while the cost is still low. Without it, behavior drifts slowly until consequences force change. By then, the damage is harder to undo. Most people avoid honest self-review because it feels uncomfortable. The mind prefers stories that protect ego rather than truth that demands adjustment. Excuses feel safer than responsibility, yet avoidance carries a hidden cost. When behavior is not examined, it repeats automatically. Over time, repeated behavior becomes character. Honest self-review interrupts this process early. It gives you the chance to redirect before habits harden. Self-review works best when it is calm and regular. It is not something to do only after failure. Waiting for failure means waiting for pain. Reviewing behavior daily keeps awareness sharp. Short reflection is enough. Ask what actions moved you forward and which ones did not. The goal is understanding, not punishment. When understanding is clear, correction follows naturally. An honest review begins with separating actions from identity. You are not your mistakes. You are the one observing them. This separation is essential. Without it, self-review turns into self-attack. With it, self-review becomes constructive. You look at behavior as data. Data informs decisions. Decisions improve outcomes. Another important aspect is timing. Reviewing behavior soon after action keeps details clear. Delayed review distorts memory. The mind reshapes events to protect comfort. Early review preserves truth. Truth allows precise correction. Precision saves effort. Self-review also requires courage. It takes courage to admit when effort was lacking or when discipline slipped. This courage is not dramatic. It is quiet acceptance. You acknowledge reality without excuses. This acceptance creates strength. Strength comes from facing facts calmly. It is also important to focus on patterns rather than isolated events. One mistake is less important than repeated behavior. Honest self-review looks for trends. Where do you consistently delay? Where do you avoid effort? Where do you react emotionally? Patterns reveal where correction matters most. Correction should be simple and immediate. Overcomplicating change leads to avoidance. Identify one adjustment and apply it the next day. Small corrections compound, large plans overwhelm. Early correction reduces the need for drastic change later. Self-review must also include recognition of what worked. Ignoring success weakens motivation. Acknowledge effective actions without pride. This reinforces behavior worth repeating. Balanced review maintains morale. Stoic thinking emphasizes examining impressions before accepting them. Self-review applies this principle internally. You examine thoughts, reactions, and choices before they define behavior. This examination increases control. You become less reactive and more deliberate. Another benefit of honest self-review is improved decision-making. When you understand past choices clearly, you make better future ones. You stop repeating avoidable errors. You learn from experience rather than reliving it. Self-review also strengthens. When you admit mistakes privately, you are more likely to correct them publicly if needed. Integrity grows when truth is faced early. Avoidance weakens integrity quietly. It is important to review behavior, not outcomes alone. Outcomes are influenced by factors beyond control. Behavior is within control. Reviewing behavior keeps responsibility focused correctly. You improve effort regardless of result. Language matters during self-review. Use neutral words. Avoid exaggeration. Describe what happened plainly. Emotional language distorts assessment. Calm description maintains clarity. Self-review also helps manage emotions. When emotions are examined, they lose intensity. You understand triggers and responses. This understanding reduces impulsive reactions. Over time, emotional regulation improves. Another aspect is consistency. Occasional review helps, but regular review transforms. Consistency keeps awareness active. Awareness prevents drift. Drift leads to regret. Self-review should be private and honest. Performing it for imagined judgment undermines truth. The value lies in accuracy, not approval. Be honest because it serves you, not because it looks good. Correction after review should be immediate but gentle. Harsh correction leads to resistance. Gentle correction encourages compliance. Discipline grows when correction feels supportive rather than punitive. Self-review also develops humility. You recognize limits and imperfections. This humility keeps learning active. Learning sustains growth. It is useful to write brief notes during review. Writing clarifies thought. It slows the mind enough to observe accurately. Written review also reveals patterns over time. Patterns guide improvement. Another benefit of honest self-review is reduced anxiety. Unexamined behavior creates vague unease. Examination replaces unease with clarity. Clarity reduces mental noise. Self-review also protects against self-deception. Without review, the mind justifies behavior automatically. Review interrupts justification. This interruption preserves integrity. Early correction saves energy. Fixing small issues requires little effort. Fixing large ones requires significant effort. Self-review is efficient leadership. It is also important to avoid over-analysis. Review should be concise. Excessive analysis leads to paralysis. Identify key points and move on. Self-review is not about dwelling on the past. It is about preparing for the future. Once correction is identified, attention returns to action. This practice strengthens independence. You rely less on external feedback. You become your own guide. This independence is essential when no one is watching. Self-review also builds trust with yourself. When you see yourself facing truth consistently, confidence grows. You trust your ability to adjust and improve. Over time, honest self-review becomes natural. You notice behavior in real time. Correction becomes quicker. Growth accelerates. Begin with a simple daily review. Keep it short. Focus on behavior. Identify one correction. Apply it. Repeat. Practicing honest self-review is an act of respect. You respect your potential enough to refine behavior. You respect reality enough to face it. This respect builds quiet strength. When you correct behavior early, you avoid regret later. You guide your life deliberately rather than reactively. This is self-leadership in its most practical form. Honest self-review does not make life easier immediately. It makes life clearer. Clarity leads to better choices. Better choices lead to steady progress. Commit to this practice. Observe without judgment. Correct without delay. Over time, you will notice fewer repeated mistakes and greater confidence in your direction. This is the result of leading yourself with honesty when no one else is watching. Chapter 7. Develop emotional control during stress when guidance is absent. Stress reveals the true state of emotional control because it removes comfort and guidance at the same time. When pressure rises and no one is there to advise or reassure you, the mind reacts quickly. Thoughts accelerate, emotions intensify, and judgment narrows. In these moments, self-leadership depends on your ability to stay steady. Emotional control is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to experience emotion without surrendering direction. This skill is developed deliberately and practiced privately long before it is needed. Many people misunderstand emotional control. They believe it means suppression or pretending not to feel. That approach fails under stress. Suppressed emotion accumulates and eventually breaks through in unhelpful ways. True control begins with recognition. You notice what you are feeling without labeling it as good or bad. This neutral awareness creates space between feeling and action. Space creates choice. When guidance is absent, stress often triggers urgency. Urgency pushes the mind toward quick solutions and immediate relief. These reactions may feel necessary but often lead to regret. Emotional control slows the process. It allows you to pause briefly before responding. That pause may last only a few seconds, but it is enough to prevent impulsive behavior. Stoic wisdom teaches that events themselves are neutral and distress arises from interpretation. Under stress, interpretations become extreme. The mind predicts worst outcomes and magnifies threat. Emotional control involves questioning these interpretations. Ask whether the thought is certain or assumed. This questioning reduces emotional intensity. Reduced intensity improves judgment. Breathing is one of the most effective tools for emotional control during stress. Stress shortens breath and tightens the body. Slow, deliberate breathing sends a signal of safety to the nervous system. This signal calms the body and supports clear thinking. Breathing does not solve the problem, but it stabilizes the state from which solutions are chosen. Another important practice is grounding attention in the present moment. Stress often pulls attention into imagined futures or replayed pasts. Neither can be acted on effectively. Returning attention to what is directly in front of you restores agency. You focus on what can be done now rather than what cannot be controlled. Emotional control also requires naming emotions accurately. Vague discomfort becomes more manageable when identified. Anger, fear, disappointment, or frustration each require different responses. Naming clarifies experience. Clarified experience is easier to manage. It is also helpful to distinguish between emotion and instruction. Emotion provides information, not commands. Feeling stress does not require immediate action. It requires assessment. This distinction prevents emotional reaction from becoming behavioral decision. When guidance is absent, internal standards must guide behavior. Emotional control protects these standards. Without control, stress pushes you toward convenience rather than principle. Control allows you to act according to values even when under pressure. Another practice is delaying response. Stress creates pressure to respond immediately. Delay creates perspective. Even a brief delay reduces emotional charge. During delay, emotions often settle enough for reason to return. Physical posture also influences emotional control. Stress often collapses posture. Standing or sitting upright improves breathing and alertness. The body and mind influence each other continuously. Adjusting the body supports mental steadiness. It is important to accept that stress will occur. Avoiding stress is unrealistic. Preparing for it is effective. Emotional control is built during calm periods through reflection and practice. You do not invent control under pressure. You rely on habits formed earlier. Self-talk also plays a role. During stress, internal dialogue often becomes critical or catastrophic. Replace exaggerated statements with accurate ones. Accuracy reduces panic. Calm language produces calm behavior. Emotional control also involves recognizing triggers. Certain situations consistently produce stress. Awareness of triggers allows preparation. Preparation reduces surprise. Reduced surprise lowers emotional reaction. Another aspect is limiting emotional spillover. Stress in one area can spread to others. Control involves containing emotion within the relevant context. You address the source without allowing it to affect unrelated actions. Rest and recovery also influence emotional control. Fatigue reduces tolerance. Adequate rest improves regulation. This is not weakness. It is maintenance. Emotional strength requires energy. It is also important to accept emotional discomfort without rushing to escape it. Discomfort is temporary. Avoidance strengthens fear. Endurance builds resilience. When you stay present, discomfort loses power. Emotional control during stress also benefits from reframing challenge as task. Tasks invite problem solving. Threats invite fear. This mental shift changes response. Silence can be useful during stress. You do not need to explain or justify immediately. Silence allows emotion to settle. Speaking later with clarity is better than speaking quickly with confusion. Another practice is focusing on effort rather than outcome. Stress often arises from concern about focusing on effort, restores control. You can always choose effort. This choice reduces helplessness. Emotional control also improves with exposure. Avoiding stressful situations prevents learning. Gradual exposure builds tolerance. Each experience strengthens confidence. It is also helpful to review stressful events afterward. Reflect on what triggered emotion and what helped manage it. This review improves future responses. Emotional control is not perfection. There will be moments of reaction. The key is recovery. How quickly you return to steadiness matters more than initial response. When guidance is absent, responsibility increases. Emotional control ensures responsibility is handled well. You do not rely on others to stabilize you. You provide stability for yourself. This ability builds trust. You trust yourself to handle pressure. This trust reduces anxiety before stress even appears. Over time, emotional control becomes part of identity. You become someone who remains composed under pressure. This composure influences decisions and relationships. Begin practicing now during minor stress. Apply breathing, pause, and questioning. Build the habit before major challenges arise. Developing emotional control during stress is a lifelong practice. Each challenge offers training. Each response refines skill. Commit to managing emotion rather than being managed by it. This commitment strengthens leadership from within. When guidance is absent and pressure rises, emotional control becomes your anchor. It keeps you steady, focused, and aligned. This steadiness allows wise action even in difficult moments. That is the mark of true self-leadership. Chapter 8. Choose long-term growth over short-term comfort daily. Every day presents a quiet choice that shapes the direction of your life. That choice is rarely dramatic. It does not announce itself. It appears as a preference between what feels comfortable now and what builds strength later. Most people do not fail because they choose what is wrong. They fail because they choose what is easy too often. Long-term growth is not destroyed by one mistake. It is slowly traded away through repeated comfort-seeking. Learning to choose growth daily is an act of self-leadership that requires awareness, discipline, and patience. Comfort is not the enemy. It has a place. Rest, enjoyment, and ease are necessary for balance. The problem begins when comfort becomes the default response to difficulty. When discomfort appears, the mind looks for relief. It suggests delay, distraction, or avoidance. These suggestions feel reasonable in the moment. The cost is not felt immediately. That is why the habit forms quietly. Growth is postponed and potential remains unused. Choosing long-term growth begins with understanding how the mind works. The mind prefers certainty and ease. Growth offers neither at first. Growth asks for effort without immediate reward. Comfort offers relief now but charges interest later. This interest appears as regret, reduced ability, or lost opportunity. Recognizing this pattern makes daily choices clearer. Long-term growth is built through small actions repeated consistently. It does not require extreme sacrifice. It requires preference. You choose the action that strengthens skill, character, or clarity, even when it feels inconvenient. These choices may seem minor, but they accumulate. Over time, they shape capacity. Daily life offers many moments for this choice. Getting up when tired, engaging in focused work, when distraction is available, speaking honestly, when silence is easier, maintaining standards when no one enforces them. Each moment is training. You either train comfort or train growth. Both grow stronger with use. Choosing growth requires redefining discomfort. Discomfort is often interpreted as a signal to stop. In reality, discomfort is often a signal of development. Muscles grow through strain, skills grow through challenge, character grows through restraint. When discomfort is understood as part of progress, resistance decreases. It is important to separate pain from harm. Growth discomfort is temporary and purposeful. Harm is lasting and destructive. Learning this difference helps guide decisions. Avoiding harm is wise. Avoiding growth discomfort limits life. Short-term comfort often disguises itself as self-care. True self-care supports long-term well-being. False self-care avoids effort while calling it protection. Growth-oriented self-care includes rest that restores, not avoidance that weakens. This distinction is essential. Choosing growth daily also requires patience. Results appear slowly. This delay tests commitment. Many people quit not because growth is impossible, but because it is quiet. Progress may not be visible day to day. Trusting the process requires discipline. Another challenge is social influence. Comfort is often socially reinforced. Growth choices may appear unnecessary or excessive to others. Acting independently requires confidence in your direction. Long-term growth often means disappointing short-term expectations. This is a necessary trade-off. Growth choices also strengthen self-respect. Each time you choose effort over ease, you reinforce trust in yourself. This trust becomes a source of confidence. Confidence built this way is stable because it rests on action rather than approval. It is helpful to make growth choices automatic where possible. Planning reduces reliance on willpower. Decide in advance how you will respond to common situations. This reduces negotiation. Negotiation weakens consistency. Growth also involves learning to sit with discomfort without reacting immediately. When the urge for comfort appears, pause. Observe the urge. Urges peak and fade. Acting after reflection rather than impulse preserves direction. Long-term growth requires a clear sense of purpose. Purpose provides context for discomfort. When you know why effort matters, endurance increases. Purpose does not need to be grand. It needs to be personal and honest. Another aspect is choosing delayed reward. This skill can be trained. Start with small delays. Delay gratification briefly and notice the outcome. Gradually increase tolerance. This strengthens self-control. Choosing growth also means accepting that some days effort will feel heavier. Mood is not a reliable guide. Commitment is acting despite mood builds discipline. Discipline supports growth when motivation fades. Growth choices often involve saying no. No to distraction, no to excess, no to shortcuts. Each no protects time and energy. Protection is necessary for progress. It is also important to forgive occasional lapses without abandoning direction. One comfort choice does not erase growth. Repeated avoidance does. Recovery matters. Return to effort promptly. Long-term growth also requires realism. You do not need to choose the hardest option every time. You need to choose the constructive one. Constructive choices build capacity without exhaustion. Reflection supports growth decisions. Briefly reviewing choices helps identify patterns. Awareness improves future decisions. Choosing growth also improves resilience. When challenges arise, you are better prepared. You have trained effort and restraint. This preparation reduces fear. Growth choices also influence identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who invests in the future. This identity shapes behavior naturally. Comfort-seeking shrinks tolerance. Growth-seeking expands it. Expanded tolerance increases options. More options increase freedom. Daily growth choices also improve focus. You learn to prioritize what matters. This clarity reduces mental clutter. It is important to remember that comfort is not evil. Unbalanced comfort is growth requires cycles. Effort followed by recovery. Balance maintains sustainability. Growth choices also include learning. Learning often feels uncomfortable because it reveals gaps. Facing gaps is necessary for improvement. Long-term growth is built privately. No one sees many of these choices. This privacy strengthens integrity. As growth accumulates, life feels more capable. You handle more without overwhelm. This capacity is the reward of consistent effort. Choosing growth daily is not about denial. It is about investment. You invest effort now to gain strength later. Begin noticing small moments today. Choose effort where comfort tempts. Keep the choice simple. Repeat tomorrow. Over time, these choices change how you live. Discomfort becomes familiar. Growth becomes normal. Comfort finds its proper place. This practice leads to a quiet sense of progress. You know you are moving forward even when results are not visible. This knowledge sustains effort. Long-term growth over short-term comfort is not a slogan. It is a daily decision. Each decision builds or weakens the future. Commit to choosing growth more often than comfort, not perfectly but consistently. This commitment will shape your character, your capability, and your direction. This is how self-leadership is practiced quietly every day when no one is watching. Chapter 9. Act with integrity, even when results remain unseen. Integrity is tested most clearly when effort produces no visible reward. When results remain unseen, the mind begins to question whether standards still matter. This moment reveals the difference between image and character. Acting with integrity without evidence of success requires inner alignment rather than external confirmation. It is a decision to remain consistent even when proof is delayed or absent. This choice defines self-leadership. Many people associate integrity with visibility. They believe honesty, effort, and fairness matter only when they are observed or rewarded. This belief creates conditional behavior. When recognition fades, effort fades. Integrity then becomes performance rather than principle. True integrity operates without witnesses. It continues quietly because it is rooted in values rather than outcomes. Unseen results create doubt. Doubt tempts compromise. The mind suggests shortcuts or lowered standards. It argues that since no one will notice, the difference does not matter. This argument is subtle and persuasive. Resisting it requires clarity about why integrity matters beyond immediate effect. Integrity is a long-view commitment. It considers the cumulative impact of actions rather than isolated outcomes. Even when results are invisible, actions still shape habits. Habits shape character. Character shapes future choices. Integrity protects this chain. Compromise weakens it. Acting with integrity without visible results requires patience. Many efforts take time to mature. Growth, learning, and trust often develop slowly. Expecting immediate proof creates pressure that undermines consistency. Integrity allows you to work without rushing validation. Another challenge is emotional fatigue. Repeated effort without feedback can feel discouraging. Emotional fatigue increases temptation to cut corners. Integrity counters this by anchoring effort to purpose rather than reward. Purpose sustains action when emotion fluctuates. Integrity also protects self-respect. When you act according to your standards, you maintain internal alignment. This alignment produces calm. Calm reduces anxiety about outcomes. You know you acted correctly regardless of result. It is important to understand that unseen results are not wasted. They contribute to readiness. Preparation often remains invisible until it is needed. Integrity ensures preparation continues, even when its value is not obvious. Another aspect is trust. Acting with integrity builds trust internally and externally. Others may not see every action, but they sense reliability over time. Internal trust is equally important. You trust yourself to do what is right without supervision. Integrity also involves resisting rationalization. Rationalization reframes compromise as practicality. It blurs standards gradually. Honest awareness interrupts this process. When you notice rationalization, pause, return to principle. Acting with integrity does not guarantee positive outcomes in every instance. Sometimes outcomes remain unfavorable despite correct action. Integrity accepts this reality. It separates effort from outcome. You are responsible for effort, not control. Stoic philosophy emphasizes virtue as the highest good. Virtue does not depend on success. It depends on intention and action. This perspective frees you from outcome attachment. Acting rightly becomes sufficient. Integrity also requires consistency across contexts. Behavior should not change based on convenience. Consistency strengthens identity. Identity influences future decisions naturally. When results remain unseen, it is useful to review behavior rather than outcome. Ask whether actions aligned with values. This review reinforces integrity. It reminds you why effort matters. Another practice is to imagine long-term consequences. Short-term compromise often produces long-term cost. Integrity avoids this cost. Thinking ahead strengthens resolve. Integrity also reduces cognitive load. When standards are clear, decisions are simpler. You do not need to calculate advantage constantly. You act according to principle. It is important to accept that integrity may feel lonely. Acting rightly without recognition can feel isolating. This feeling is temporary. The stability it creates is lasting. Integrity also involves fairness. Treat others well even when there is no benefit. This builds ethical consistency. Ethical consistency builds trustworthiness. Acting with integrity also means honoring commitments, even when breaking them would go unnoticed. Private commitments matter. They shape reliability. Integrity strengthens resilience. When facing criticism or failure, integrity provides a stable base. You know you acted correctly. This knowledge supports recovery. Another benefit is reduced regret. Regret often comes from compromising values. Integrity minimizes this risk. You may regret outcomes but not actions. Integrity also encourages humility. You do not demand recognition. You focus on doing what is right. This humility reduces ego-driven decisions. When results remain unseen, integrity trains endurance. Endurance is necessary for long projects and difficult goals. Without endurance, effort stops early. It is also helpful to track effort privately. Keep record of actions aligned with values. This record provides evidence of integrity even when results lag. Integrity also influences reputation over time. Reputation is built slowly. Consistent integrity eventually becomes visible through patterns. Visibility arrives later, but is earned. Acting with integrity also improves relationships. People trust consistency. Trust strengthens collaboration. Integrity also reduces internal conflict. You do not debate whether to compromise. Standards decide for you. This reduces stress. Another challenge is envy. Seeing others gain results through questionable means can weaken resolve. Integrity requires resisting comparison. Focus on your path. Integrity also supports clarity. You know what you stand for. This clarity guides action under uncertainty. When outcomes are invisible, it is tempting to disengage. Integrity maintains engagement. Engagement sustains momentum. Integrity is also a form of self-respect. You treat your values as meaningful. This respect builds confidence. It is important to remember that integrity is practiced daily. It is not proven once. Each choice reinforces or weakens it. Acting with integrity does not require perfection. Mistakes happen. Integrity is shown through correction and honesty afterward. Integrity also involves transparency with yourself. Admit when standards slip, correct early. Over time, integrity becomes habitual. You no longer consider alternatives. Acting rightly feels natural. When results finally appear, integrity ensures they are sustainable. Success built on compromise often collapses. Integrity-based success endures. Integrity also creates peace of mind. You are not haunted by hidden actions. Peace of mind improves focus and energy. Acting with integrity when results remain unseen is a quiet discipline. It does not seek applause. It builds character. This discipline prepares you for leadership. Leaders often act without immediate reward. Integrity sustains them. Begin by defining non-negotiable standards. Apply them consistently. Observe how alignment feels. Accept that some efforts will remain unseen. Let this be part of the practice. Trust that integrity shapes who you become even when outcomes lag. Commit to acting rightly regardless of visibility. This commitment builds strength you can rely on when no one is watching and nothing seems to change. Integrity still matters. It matters because it shapes you. That shaping is the real result. Chapter 10. Commit to lifelong self-leadership through consistent improvement. Lifelong self-leadership is the ultimate commitment a person can make to themselves because it encompasses all other forms of personal growth. It is not a temporary project or a seasonal effort. It is a continuous practice of guiding your own thoughts, decisions, and actions toward improvement, regardless of circumstance or recognition. True self-leadership begins with accepting that the responsibility for your life cannot be delegated. No one else controls your focus, your habits, or your response to challenges. The sooner you internalize this truth, the sooner your potential begins to expand. Committing to self-leadership requires clarity about personal standards and goals. Without clarity, action is reactive and inconsistent. Clarity allows intentional effort. You choose what matters and disregard what does not. This does not require knowing everything about the future. It requires knowing what is meaningful in the present. Every decision is guided by these standards, and over time, the alignment of action with principle strengthens both competence and confidence. Consistency is the foundation of self-leadership. Occasional effort is insufficient. Improvement compounds when it is applied day after day, regardless of mood, motivation, or external reward. The practice of consistent improvement is not glamorous. It involves repetitive, often mundane actions that collectively produce significant results. Skipping steps weakens the structure. Small daily investments in focus, discipline, and learning gradually build resilience, skill, and self-trust. Another element of self-leadership is reflection. Without reflection, effort lacks direction. Reflection allows evaluation of progress, recognition of patterns, and identification of areas for adjustment. Honest self-assessment prevents stagnation. When you review decisions and behaviors with accuracy, you learn from mistakes and reinforce what is effective. Reflection also provides perspective, allowing you to distinguish between temporary setbacks and structural issues that require long-term adjustment. Self-leadership requires proactive behavior. Waiting for guidance or opportunity is surrendering control. Leaders create their own structure, define priorities, and take responsibility for outcomes. Proactivity is built through planning, preparation, and disciplined execution. It strengthens confidence because actions are intentional rather than reactive. When you lead yourself, waiting becomes unnecessary and indecision loses influence. Developing self-leadership also means mastering emotional regulation. Your capacity to act consistently under pressure determines the reliability of your self-leadership. Emotions will always arise, but their intensity should not dictate behavior. By observing feelings without letting them dominate, you maintain clarity and stability. Emotional mastery is not about suppression. It is about choosing response over reaction and acting according to values rather than impulses. Continuous learning is a critical component of lifelong self-leadership. Knowledge and skill are never complete. Every experience provides an opportunity for insight, and every interaction carries a lesson. Leaders commit to learning as a constant habit, embracing both success and failure as teachers. Curiosity fuels growth, and humility ensures openness to correction. Improvement without learning eventually stagnates, whereas learning without application produces no progress. Self-leadership requires both. Accountability is another pillar. The person you answer to most consistently is yourself. Without external supervision, the standard of performance depends entirely on internal discipline. This demands honesty. Avoiding reality, making excuses, or rationalizing lapses undermines self-leadership. When you commit fully, you track effort, review outcomes, and adjust behavior promptly. Accountability reinforces integrity and accelerates growth. Time management is inseparable from self-leadership. Leading yourself means using time deliberately. Procrastination and distraction are forms of surrender. Scheduling priorities, creating routines, and protecting focus ensures energy is invested in meaningful work. Time is the resource most directly under your control, and mastery over it amplifies the results of other leadership practices. Another aspect is resilience. Life inevitably presents challenges beyond control. Self-leadership does not remove obstacles, but provides the tools to navigate them effectively. Resilience grows through preparation, persistence, and the capacity to maintain standards when circumstances are difficult. Each challenge faced strengthens confidence in your ability to manage future adversity. Self-leadership also requires integrity. Acting according to principle, even when unseen or unrewarded, maintains alignment with values. Integrity is the anchor that prevents deviation under pressure. Without it, leadership is inconsistent and unreliable. With integrity, every choice, effort, and behavior reinforces your identity and strengthens self-trust. Self-leadership is not static. As life changes, expectations, knowledge, and circumstances evolve. Lifelong commitment means continual adjustment. Habits that once served you may require refinement. Goals may shift. Maintaining alignment requires vigilance and adaptability. Leaders revisit standards regularly, refine processes, and embrace change as an opportunity for recalibration. The practice of self-leadership is cumulative. Every choice to act deliberately, every reflection, every small improvement compounds over time. Gains may appear slow initially, but they accelerate as capacity, confidence, and competence grow. This compounding effect distinguishes those who passively drift through life from those who shape it with purpose. Self-leadership requires courage. The commitment to improvement, to acting with integrity, and to taking responsibility exposes you to uncertainty, failure, and criticism. Courage allows persistence despite these risks. Each act of self-guided discipline reinforces bravery and strengthens character. Over time, fear loses its power, and action becomes a natural response to challenge. Motivation is helpful, but not necessary. Motivation fluctuates. Self-leadership relies on systems, habits, and principles that operate independently of emotional highs. Discipline sustains action when enthusiasm wanes. Habits built around consistent practice create momentum that carries growth forward even in low energy periods. Another component is vision. Lifelong self-leadership is guided by a sense of direction. Knowing what kind of person you want to become informs daily choices. Vision anchors effort when immediate results are invisible. It transforms small, ordinary actions into purposeful steps toward meaningful outcomes. Self-leadership also requires reflection on failure. Mistakes are inevitable, but response determines their impact. Leaders learn quickly, adjust strategy, and continue forward. Fear of failure diminishes over time because experience builds skill and confidence. Resilience is reinforced through consistent, deliberate action despite setbacks. Lifelong self-leadership is a practice of balance. It integrates focus and flexibility, discipline and patience, effort and reflection. It does not demand perfection. It demands consistency, honesty, and intention. Improvement is continuous and iterative. Each day is an opportunity to lead more effectively than the day before. Commitment to this path produces independence. You rely on internal standards rather than external control. Decision-making becomes more confident. Confidence, rooted in competence and integrity, empowers action in uncertainty. Self-leadership transforms ordinary life into a directed, purposeful journey. The final element is persistence. Growth is not linear. Challenges, distractions, and fatigue will test resolve. Persistence ensures continuity. It is the quiet force that converts small, consistent actions into long-term transformation. Without persistence, knowledge, skill, and intention fail to create lasting change. Begin by establishing daily practices that reinforce self-leadership. Observe actions, assess progress, and adjust as needed. Create routines that build discipline. Engage in reflection that strengthens awareness. Make choices aligned with values even when difficult. Commit to learning continuously. Protect focus, maintain integrity, and persist despite setbacks. Over time, these practices integrate into identity. Leading yourself becomes habitual. Each choice reinforces standards and builds capacity. Challenges no longer dictate behavior. They provide opportunity for application. Growth becomes inevitable because action is deliberate, principled, and consistent. Committing to lifelong self-leadership is committing to yourself. It is the decision to take full responsibility for life, to improve continuously, and to act consistently in alignment with values. It is not a temporary effort, but a permanent way of engaging with the world. This commitment shapes character, strengthens resilience, and ensures that your life reflects intentional growth regardless of circumstances. When every day is approached as an opportunity to lead oneself, improvement becomes natural, challenges become manageable, and potential becomes reality. Lifelong self-leadership is not a goal to be achieved, but a practice to be lived. It is the foundation upon which a meaningful, empowered, and resilient life is built.